If you like what you're hearing, put your money where your media is by supporting ad-free independent podcasts like this one. Go to lauraflanders.com/membership, and thank you. Hi, I'm Laura Flanders. This week, 150 years of Karl Marx's Capital and how an unlikely housing rights activist became mayor of Barcelona. I talk in studio with distinguished Professor David Harvey and meet filmmaker Pau Faus, director of the film Ada for Mayor. All that and a commentary on the Catalan Crisis. Is it really about history or what's happening now? It's all coming up here on the Laura Flanders Show, the place where the people who say it can't be done take a back seat to the people who are doing it. Welcome. 150 years after the publication of the first volume of Das Kapital, Karl Marx's analysis is as relevant as ever, says our next guest, and he's got millions of downloads to prove it. Distinguished professor of anthropology and geography at the Graduate Center of the City University of New York, David Harvey has been teaching Karl Marx's Capital for 40 years in classrooms, but also online as a free download. His most recent book, just out, is Marx, Capital and the Madness of Economic Reason. It takes a deep dive into Marx's curiosity about crises. Are they inbuilt into capital or imposed on it? Or to put it another way, if, as Marx might have said, capital is value in motion, where are we headed? David Harvey, welcome back.
Thank you.
So are we headed, if capital is value in motion, are we headed off a cliff?
No, not necessarily off a cliff. I think one of the things that's remarkable about the history of capital is how it's managed to renew itself. And it goes through a crisis and it comes out looking completely different with fresh clothes and everything else. And so a crisis is very often a remanagement of what capital is about.
Hence your interest in that water cycle, the hydrological cycle that you talk about in the book.
Yeah, well, I think that capital circulates. It begins as money, and then money is used to buy some commodities, which are then made, then they're put into work, and new commodities are made, and then they're sold, and then it goes back to money, and then it comes back again, and it goes round and round and round, and it starts to be very elaborate in terms of some of the contextual conditions under which this can happen. So I try to sort of understand the circulation of it, and then I also try to say, well, what happens when this is no longer a cycle but a spiral? And that's the important point, I think, that we look at, which is that a spiral, and it's no accident that we use phrases like things spiral out of control. Right. Capital is always spiraling out of control.
How so? Explain that.
Well, for instance, it overaccumulates. It gets too much capital. And then people sit there with a load of money and I need to find a new way to invest. Where can I invest it? And they can't invest, so they go and put it in the art market, or they go and put it somewhere else, or they speculate in land values and so on. So capital is constantly producing surpluses, which then has a hard time disposing of them. Often then hits a blockage, and if there's some blockage, like it produces too many commodities and there's not enough money to buy the commodities, then suddenly you get a crisis. Where there are commodities sitting around unsold.
But surplus, David, I mean, why can't that surplus spread? Why does it have to spiral and concentrate? Is there something about capital that is inimical to spreading out to more people?
But if you spread out too much, then you get real problems on your hands. For example, China is an interesting case. It's had this huge development process. And in 3 years, China consumed 45% more cement than the United States consumed in 100 years.
Goodness.
Okay, in other words, they got out of the crisis of 2007, 2008 by an urbanization and infrastructure project, which spread masses and masses and masses of cement around. Mm-hmm. Now, if you kind of say 50 years' time we're going to have 3 times that amount of cement spread around, so yes, we can spread it around, but you're spreading cement around. Yeah. And pretty soon we'll be living with cement up to here. And so there are certain limits and certain things that cannot be spread around. The thing that worries me most is the one form of capital that can actually accumulate without limit is money. Right. And you can just add zeros to the money supply, and actually it's kind of interesting. You know, once upon a time, to be a millionaire was kind of something special. Now you have to talk about billionaires, and now you're talking about trillionaires, and now you're talking about quadrillionaire economies. And we kind of say, well, where are we going to go with this? And this is an accumulation process of a certain sort, which is a bit insane, which is why I use the term the madness of economic reason, because economists seem to think this is okay, and that this is the way things should go. And you kind of go, no, this has implications for everything, social relations, environmental conditions, and of course, going back to the China case, the environmental conditions in China, with all that cement being spread around, are pretty disastrous and catastrophic.
You're listening to The Laura Flanders Show. I'm Laura. My guest is distinguished Professor David Harvey. We're talking about his new book, Marx, Capital and the Madness of Economic Reason. Accumulation of wealth for the capitalist set has been spiraling out of control with disastrous effect on people and the planet, says Harvey. How do we stop the madness? Find out next.
La gente sencilla, la gente común, la gente honrada, tenemos el poder. ¡Vamos! El run run en las calles, el run run en las plazas, el run run es defender el bien común, imparable es el run run.
That was El Run Run by Ivan Lagarto, featuring Ada Colau, the 2015 elected mayor of Barcelona, singing the campaign song of the citizen platform Guanem, which translates to Let's Win. Let's do it. This is the Laura Flanders Show. We're supported by our listeners and viewers of this program, bringing you forward-thinking people with real solutions for change, equity, and justice every week. But we can't do it without you, so please take a moment to become a sustaining member. You can do it for as little as $2 a month at lauraflanders.com. That's where you'll also find the entire archive of all our shows going back almost 10 years at this point. Coming up later in the program, filmmaker Pau Faus on the intimate journey of Ada Colau, from anti-foreclosure activist to becoming mayor of Barcelona. And then my weekly commentary, Catalan Crisis or capitalist one? What's happening in Spain is not only about the ancient past. It's all coming up, but first, a little more from David Harvey. We're talking about his latest book, Marx, Capital and the Madness of Economic Reason. Over 200 years ago, Marx had a few things to say about the market shift from commodities to debt. It fuels the fires of economic madness that's capitalism, says Harvey. What did Marx say about finance capital and markets and stock markets like Wall Street?
Well, he talked about the fact that actually, of course, credit and debt are very much about the future. And that what happens is that the future gets foreclosed. When you're indebted, you've got to pay off your debt. And so a lot of the incentive these days is not greed for more money, but the incentive is you've got to pay off your debt. So an accumulation of debts then becomes one of the big ways in which the economy gets driven onwards and onwards and onwards. So this spiraling of debt, which has gone on particularly strongly over the last 30 years, is again something that is driving the economy in what I think are pretty crazy ways.
So I keep thinking of Marx's reference to socially valuable labor. Was that the phrase?
Socially necessary labor time is what value.
So that social piece got put into the picture.
Yes.
That was really, you emphasize over and over again.
Yes.
It's about social relations.
Yes, it's about always. Yes.
So is there a clue in that to how we move forward as people are talking today so much more about valuing labor that has been socially necessary but not not related to capital, to money, like women's labor, unpaid labor?
The social labor we do for others is something that's terribly important. But when it's mediated through the market system, then some forms of social labor are valuable and some are not. And some are validated and some are not. Now, what that means is that capital itself, as a form of circulation, doesn't really care about the environmental conditions, doesn't really care about, who's taking responsibility for looking after the kids at home. I mean, those are issues that capital is not concerned with, and it basically says, let everybody else be bothered about all of that. We're simply going to get on with what we want to do, which is to take the money, put it into production, get more value, get more money, and keep on going, and we get more and more and more money. And we, of course, will see the distribution of that money in various ways, but generally speaking, the argument Marx is concerned is that the money always ends up in the hands of the capitalist class.
So if we begin to remunerate more of that socially valuable work, and if it becomes a bigger and bigger part of our economy, what happens? Capitalists just manage to rig that game too?
Yes, of course. Now, what you see is that actually many domestic functions get privatized and get turned into commercial functions. I mean, here in New York, when I came here, I was amazed at the number of stores that said nails. And I'm thinking, what's going on here? And I thought they must be hardware stores.
A lot of hammering going on.
Yes, but of course no. And take out food, it's, all of these sorts of things. So that actually a lot of domestic functions have been privatized, commodified, and turned into something completely different. Now, does that make gender relations much better, or does it leave gender relations in the same state as they were in before, or however, you know? So I think this kind of notion that somehow or other we have to sort of pay people for wage labor in the household is a crazy idea. In fact, we want to stop as much as we can the whole kind of commodification of many of this social labor we do for others. And this again brings us back to, you know, are people going to be paid for helping out when a hurricane strikes? Yeah. And the answer is no. They do a lot of social labor, and they do it willingly and voluntarily. And actually, in many ways, I think we value that kind of thing far more than we do if somebody sits there and says, I'm not going out there and rescuing anybody unless I'm paid.
Right. We had Kate Rayworth on the show not long ago, Donut Economics, and she said her studies showed that when incentives were given for people to send their kid to school or get health vaccinations, people stopped doing it unless they were paid.
Yes, right, exactly.
So where are we in this cycle of madness and money?
I think we're at an inflection point in the history of capitalism, where compound growth in, say, 1850 was something that could be thought about and was not really a problem. But we've now got a global economy that's, I don't know, something like $60 or $70 trillion, and we're talking about compounding the rate of growth on that over the next 50 years, and you see you're in astronomical.
Yeah.
And something's got to stop. We cannot continue along this line. Like I say, compound growth in 1850, when capital was just operating in a few little small areas of the world. Now it's all of China, now it's all of Indonesia, India, Middle East. I mean, compound growth on all of that for another 150 years, forget it. I mean, it's
a whole lot of concrete.
Yes. Yes.
David Harvey, the new book is Marx, Capital and the Madness of Economic Reason. Check it out. You can get more information and see my earlier interview with David about Hurricane Harvey at our website. Thanks, David.
Thank
Great
you.
to be with you.
Always.
That was Voces en Guerra, or Voices at War, by Opoloh, featuring Diego Pedragosa. Diego is the sound designer and composer for the documentary Ada for Mayor by Pau Faus. This is the Laura Flanders Show. I'm Laura. If you're not already a subscriber to the podcast, please become one at lauraflanders.com. And if you're subscribing at iTunes, write us a review, give us a rating. It really makes a difference. Coming up later, my weekly commentary, The F Word on the Catalan Crisis. Is it really about ancient history or capitalism and what's happening now? We just heard from David Harvey. Among his most famous books is Rebel Cities, From the Right to the City to the Urban Revolution. It was a kind of revolution that took place in Barcelona a few years back, when community activist and anti-foreclosure organizer Ada Colau decided to run for mayor and won. filmmaker Pau Faus followed that campaign every step of the way. And I had a chance to catch up with them and talk about it not so long ago. We spoke right as that part of Spain was in the grips of an uprising over Catalan independence. He touched on that too. Here's Pau Faus.
My name is Pau Faus, and I am the director of the documentary film Ada for Mayor. I met Ada Colau when she was part of the anti-eviction movement. Ada was one of the most popular activists that there was in Spain around 2011, 2012. That was the moment when the evictions became like the image of the crisis in Spain, the families being evicted while the banks were being rescued. So the anti-eviction movement was a very popular movement, and I was part of that movement as a filmmaker. And when Ada Colau and other people from the anti-eviction movement and other people from many other social movements decided to make this citizen platform to try to win the local election in Barcelona, I realized that that was a very strong story, the activist running for mayor. And I also realized that I had the possibility to have an access to how she was living this whole journey that she was about to start. So that's what the film is about, and that's what we proposed to her. We said, we want to film this, and we want to film it while it's happening, and we want to know how are you feeling while it's happening. I mean, the 15M movement, the Indignados movement, was the moment where many young people, but people from different ages, but mainly young, said, we had enough. People were struggling to pay the mortgage, people were struggling to pay the food and to pay the school and to pay for their clothes, And what was many times told by the governments and the people in charge is like, what is happening is your fault. We are all responsible. People really felt like they don't represent us anymore. In these last years in Spain, you have seen many people that for the first time realized the power that you have when you are politically organized and when you have a clear objective and when you believe that what is happening is wrong. She represents for me the image of the organized citizenship that at some moment decides if we don't do it, they will not do it,
Have begun to distrust institutional politics. And it's as if everyone who joins institutional politics does it out of vanity or for the money. It's a dirty business. Just by going near it, even if you're a good person, you're tarnished. You're fallen. You've joined politics. You hear that phrase a lot. I get it myself on Twitter. I try to ignore it because I don't believe it. But it's not easy, and sometimes it gets to me.
And they see the institutions as another tool to change things, but not as the ultimate tool. And of course, how can you do that with the responsibility that you have? When you come from social movements to share your weaknesses, and we will learn out of it, we can learn from mistakes. This, that in social movements is something that is positive, in institutional politics it's something that is negative. This could be part of this new way of doing politics, and she's saying in the film that she's realizing that this thing is not as easy as she, in a naive way, maybe was expecting. Now you have realized that politics is something a little more improvised than we think. Sometimes they were very surprised of the interpretation people gives to something they did. There was this joke, like they think we are more smart than we are, So maybe if the film was about a man who wants to be the president of a country, I would have learned that politics is something very abstract. I don't know. But my experience is that I realized that municipal politics, it's something more, it's more like an everyday situation that you have to solve in a way. Of course you have to look forward, but there is always something in the everyday that affects you. So it's not as strategical as people think.
This is the Laura Flanders Show. I'm Laura. I'm talking with director Pau Faus about his film Ada for Mayor, which follows the mayoral campaign of Ada Colau, from community activist to mayor of Barcelona. How did she do it? And how did she make municipal policy stimulating to millions of people? And how did she make it make a difference? A trickle-up approach? More to come.
Jo no canto per la veu, ni tampoc per la seguida. Canto per un amic meu que per mi donaria la vida. Jo no canto per la veu.
That's Cant de Batre by Maria Arnal and Marcel Bagés from the documentary Ada for Mayor. You can watch this week's episode and see the clips from the documentary at lauraflanders.com. And while you're there, become a subscriber to receive information on all our upcoming shows, events, and more. Coming up, Catalan Crisis or Capitalist One. But first, my conversation with Pau Faus gets to the question of what happens next. We were talking about the conflict in Catalonia that was breaking out as we spoke. He touched on that and more.
Many people was quite surprised about the fact that she's really made for the role. She is now a stronger political figure than she was 2 years ago. And many people sees her as a very influential figure, not only in Barcelona, but in Catalonia and in Spain. And even though it's not easy to talk about everyday life problems when you have these situations like the referendum, many of the topics that were topics more related to social movements like pollution, gentrification, the problem with the tourism, public space problems because of tourism, and the salary, like working contracts, many things that were more like demands from social movements, right now are in the center of the political debates in Barcelona. The terrorist attack was something that was very shocking for the whole city, and I think that it was something that even with the tragedy, in a way it made more strong some beliefs that we are very proud of in Barcelona, and people knew that this was something that could be used from a racist point of view, and people were very fast, and also the local government very fast in saying, now more than before, we believe that we have to live all together. And I think that the fact that she was the mayor at that moment helped for this thing to happen. In the Catalan vote, which is what happened in the last days, it's been very important the position that the party that she is part of took, and it's a position that many people agree, is that it's not only about yes or no, we want independence, we don't want independence. It's mainly about we want to vote,
For a long time, we have been in a situation of deadlock between Catalonia and the government of the Spanish state, precisely because no one has put any proposals on the table, because there has been no dialogue, because there has been no political negotiation. Today, I don't think we are talking about the question of independence, yes or no, nor are we talking about a split between Catalonia and Spain. We are talking about a split between Mariano Rajoy and his government and Catalonia.
We have 7 political parties now in Catalonia. 3 of them are openly pro-independence. 3 of them are not only against independence, but they are even against the referendum. And there is one political movement that says it's not about yes and no, it's about voting. Let's dialogue, let's find a solution, and let's vote in a proper referendum. And in this political movement, pro-independence people and people who are against independence can live together with no problem.
That was filmmaker Pau Faus discussing Ada for Mayor, his documentary you can see clips of which at our website. That's lauraflanders.com. Next up, Catalan Crisis or Capitalist One? What's happening in Spain is not only about ancient history. It's been a challenging time for the commentariat, with self-determination struggles breaking out in obscure parts of Europe. From Scotland to Catalonia, independence fights have had pundits scuttling for the history books. Noble cultures, ancient grievances. The last time many people heard the word Catalonia, it was on the cover of a screed by George Orwell. And just what was that Spanish Civil War about anyway? It's not easy boning up on Europe's fusty history, but if they didn't dig down into the ancient past, the pundits just might have to look at the more recent sort. What if the crisis in Catalonia had as much to do with 2008 as 1978, with the crisis of capitalism as much as the crisis of the Spanish Constitution? The roots of the Catalan crisis are culturally specific, but the fact that it's breaking out now isn't all that esoteric. Corruption has so corroded the relationship between the governed and their governments that all across the capitalist world, democracies are at breaking point. Catalan independence comes in many flavors. Some separatists are eager to rid their affluent region of its responsibilities to Spain's poorer parts. Immigrants, it should be noted, weren't permitted to vote in the referendum. Others, inspired by the progress of Barcelona under its community organizer mayor, Ada Colau, imagine a region reclaimed and remade from the bottom up with free healthcare, quality education, and decision-making by popular assembly. Where the various independence tendencies in the iron-fisted Spanish Prime Minister meet is atop a political powder keg that is far bigger than they are. The Transnational Institute recently calculated that since 2008, some $792 billion have been lost to Europeans of all nations, spent on bailing out big broken banks and enriching a few financial firms through obscure private deals brokered through central bankers, not legislators. In Spain, some 16 billion euros went from Spanish taxpayers to just one bank, Bankia, with no public vote. Deals like that make a mockery of Prime Minister Rajoy's high-minded talk about democracy. And then there's the privatization. Selling national public assets to private multinational corporations has long been EU policy, even as they opposed Catalan independence on the grounds of preserving national integrity. Spain sold off its airports at prices set by, and also, it turns out, for the benefit of the very same private firms that were advising on the sell-off. One could go on. Corruption, let's just say, breeds contempt. The shame in Barcelona is that the blood in the streets is getting more press in weeks than years of innovative policy have received ever. And yet Barcelona's progressive municipalization is also a response to the old-school corruption the people faced. The past isn't dead, it's not even past, said someone once. Let's just not let it obscure us to what's happening in the present. This show is produced by yours truly, with Monica Mohapatra, Natasha Elena Ullman, Jeannie Hopper, Danica D'Souza, Emily Allen, Charlotte Prager, and Diego Romero Montiel. I'd like to hear what you think, so write to me. That's Laura, L-A-U-R-A, at lauraflanders.com. I do my best to get back to you as soon as I can. The program's made possible by the Novo Foundation and listeners like you. Become a member today. Thanks for your ongoing support. We couldn't do it without you. Stay kind, stay curious. Till the next time, I'm Laura Flanders.